In this video, I'm gonna show you how I flattened a slab using only scrap wood, a router, and a few really key techniques. I've also got free plans to this router sled in the description. I know you guys could probably figure this out on your own, but sometimes it's nice just to have some reference measurements to start off with. So let's go ahead and get started. This video is sponsored by Flexispot. So first up, I want to talk about selecting the right slab, or any board in this case, but I'm flattening a slab, so we're going to talk about slabs. I always want to get slabs from a source that I can trust. In my case, I went to Big Red Sawmill. These guys are just a short trip away from me, and they have a lot of great selection out there. I always try to stay away from slabs that look like they've been stored outside in someone's shed or garage that hasn't been temperature controlled. A lot of times these slabs have higher moisture content than you want, and they also will house a lot more bugs inside of them if they haven't been properly dried in a kiln. Now, I paid a little bit extra at the sawmill to plane the underside of the slab to give me a head start. However, this was a pretty long slab, so there was a little bit of twist in it even after it was planed, so I knew when I got home I would have to surface both sides to make sure I had a nice flat slab. Getting something like this Klein moisture meter was really helpful. It's pretty affordable. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out. Pro tip though, make sure it's got some fresh batteries in it before you drive all the way out to your sawmill and try to find out how high the moisture is in the wood. Luckily, I had just enough battery to know that this slab I wanted to get was going to be right around 4%, so plenty low for what I was going to be using it for. Wood dried in a kiln is unable to absorb moisture the same as non-dried wood is. Kiln dried wood is going to stay a lot more stable. Yes, it will move a little bit, but it's not going to warp or bend or move nearly as much as undried wood. All right, so I got my slab I want. I got it back to the shop. It's got the moisture content level that I need for this standing desk build I'm doing. But now I'm going to need a flattening jig and a router sled. You can buy these or you can build one. I was gonna buy one until I saw the price of some of them and thought, holy cow, I'm gonna build my own. So as I promised at the beginning of this video, I'm gonna build this entire flattening jig and sled completely for free out of scrap melamine I had left over from my epic grill cart build. So let's go ahead and talk about the base of the jig first. You can use plywood or other scrap wood you have, just as long as you were able to make the rails as perfectly straight as possible and level with each other. That's the key. Both rails on both sides of the flattening jig have to be level with each other. If you don't have a large enough workbench or flat area for your flattening jig like I didn't, you can use shims on the garage floor or your shop floor to make sure your jig base is level. So how big should you make your jig? Well, that is a great question. I'm glad you asked. This is really going to depend on the slab or the wood that you're trying to flatten, but always err on the side of it being too big rather than too small. This is actually where I messed up. You want your jig wide enough so that when you're pushing the router back and forth on the sled, you have plenty of room between the fence and the slab you're flattening so the router bit doesn't sit on the wood causing burning when you're switching directions. As you can see here, I had a lot of burning on the sides when I was pushing the router back and forth because I made the jig wide enough for the top side of the slab and not the bottom. This is a live edge slab, so it was actually wider on the bottom than the top. Didn't take this into account. This is also a hard maple slab, so maple definitely burns a lot easier than other types of woods. The rails on the jig need to be slightly higher than the wood you're flattening, but not so high that your router can't reach it when you plunge down through the sled. This is also a mistake I made, so to fix this, all I did was add some more scrap melamine to the base to lift the slab, getting it about a 1/4 inch below the rails. This seemed like a really good spot. Now this is actually really important. I learned this the hard way. When you attach the rail to the base, use pocket holes or a butt joint, but the rail has to be on top of whatever you're using for the base. Putting screws through the ends of the baseboards can cause the wood or melamine to raise, making it an unlevel surface, which will completely go against everything we're trying to do here. So take note of this, because we are going to use this exact same method for the router sled, which we're going to talk about in just a couple of minutes. I want to take a second and thank Flexispot for sending me their E7 Plus standing frame to use as the base for this build, since I want to use the slab to be the new top for my standing desk. I spend a lot of time on my desk between running my business, editing, and everything else, and I'm not saying I'm old, but my back just can't handle hours of sitting anymore, so I have to have a standing desk. I've been working at a standing desk for about 10 years now, and it's really saved my back. I've definitely noticed when I haven't used the standing desk how much more back pain I have versus when I have the standing desk. The first thing that stood out to me with E7 Plus is that it has a 540-pound static weight capacity. That's right, 540 pounds. I can even lift up to 440 pounds while adjusting. That's a lot more than any desk that I've ever owned or seen, so you don't have to worry about overloading it with computers or gear, whatever else you're storing on your desk. This has a much higher weight capacity over something like the Uplift V2. Basically, no matter how much you pile on here, it doesn't flinch. This thing glides up and down super smoothly. I've been using the E7 Plus for months now. My wife is using the other E7 Plus that I have, so I'm going to be building this desk for me. She loves using it, I love using it. I highly recommend one. The legs are 3-stage and extend all the way up to 51.57 inches, which actually makes it the tallest standing desk you can buy right now. So this desk is gonna work for you whether you're vertically challenged like I am or really tall. This desk is also backed with a 15-year warranty and 30-day risk-free return policy, which should make you feel really good. And compared to other 4-leg standing desks that usually cost well over $1,000, this one is surprisingly budget friendly. It's got a lot of cool settings, and the keypad even has a USB charger, which has been very handy for charging my phone. If you want to check it out and get yourself one, I'll drop a link in the description where you can find the E7 Plus and support the channel. A big thanks to Flexispot for sponsoring this video. They've been very supportive of Guardian Woodworking. Let's go ahead and get back to this standing desk build. Speaking of router sleds, let's go ahead and talk about building the router sled. To build my router sled, I started by measuring the base of the router I was planning on using. This is a Bosch 2¼ horsepower router with a plunge base. So I'm going to measure the base and then add 1/8 of an inch. We don't want it to be too snug. We want there to be a little bit of wiggle room. So we're going to add that 1/8 inch to the measurement of the base. And then we're also going to add the thickness of both sled walls. In my case, I'm using 3/4 inch melamine. So I need to add 1.5 inches plus the 1/8 of an inch. So we're looking at the measurement of the base of the router plus 1 5/8 of an inch. You guys should definitely double check my mathing though. So let me know in the comments if my measurements are correct. I'm gonna make my sled walls between 2 and 4 inches high. Any higher is unnecessary and any lower is a little too low in my opinion. And this is also very important. I feel like I'm saying that a lot in this video, but it is very important. When you attach the sled walls to the sled base, use pocket holes or butt joints, but you got to make sure the screws, just like before, are going in the top or the bottom of the sled baseboard, not the edges. Putting screws in the edges will cause the board to raise slightly, like I mentioned earlier, and any imperfection on the sled base will directly translate to the wood you are trying to flatten. So it's very important to keep that sled baseboard as flat and smooth as possible. To make the cut on the baseboard for the router bit, I'm actually going to use the router bit that I'm planning on using to flatten the slab with, and just barely touch the sled base with it on both ends. Make a couple of measurements and lines for reference, and then use a Forstner bit and a jigsaw to cut out the middle of the sled base. So you can use a track saw or circular saw. It might be easier too if you do this before adding the sled walls. It's completely up to you. This is just how I did it, so take it or leave it. Once you cut out the middle of the sled and you've got room for your router bit to move around without touching the sides, you can call it good here, or you could get fancy and add some stop blocks on the underside of your sled or to the jig base so that when you're sliding it back and forth, you're not nicking the side rails or nicking your slab. In hindsight, I probably should have done a little bit more of this, but sometimes you're just on the clock. You got deadlines and you just got to get it done. So I ended up just adding some blocks to the ends of the sled so the router wouldn't slide off the sled and the sled wouldn't slide off the base rails. DIY flattening jigs like this don't have any dust collection, obviously, unless you go build some sort of cool dust collection jig. I've actually seen that done a couple of times, but you want to be prepared for a huge mess in your shop. This is one of the messiest jobs you can do, is slab flattening. So definitely wear a mask no matter where you're doing this. And if you can, maybe try to do this outside. All right, we got the flattening jig built. We got the sled built. So now we're going to position the slab on top of the flattening jig. When I lay the slab down, I want to find out where the gaps are so I can use shims to balance and stabilize it on both ends. These cheap wooden shims that I got, actually, they were like $2 at the store, worked really well, or you can make your own. But who has that kind of time to make your own shims? I'm too busy with more important things like flattening slabs for standing desks and making more cool little builds with free plans for all you wonderful people and subscribers. And speaking of subscribers, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and give this video a like if it's helping you out. So there's actually a right way and a wrong way to use the router. Any chatter or inconsistent movement on the router is going to translate directly to the surface of the wood you're flattening. I'm going to keep stressing that point. So turn the speed of your router down. The bigger the bit, the slower the speed. So mine was set right between 4 and 5 on this Bosch router. So I plunged the router down to find out how deep I will need to make my first pass. I like to take 1/8-inch deep passes. This is actually the Whiteside 1/2-inch shank 2-inch servicing bit from Whiteside. I'll put a link in the description below. It's an awesome bit. But even though this is a big bit, you could take up to a 1/4-inch pass, but you get a lot cleaner cut at 1/8 deep, and it also keeps the bit a lot cooler. I've had the best success with taking about 1 inch or so of material off the top at a time and not taking a full 2-inch pass. Normally you want to take half the width of material of the bit. So in this case, a 2-inch bit, we're going to take a 1-inch pass of material off the top. So the bit is always going to turn counterclockwise, and we want the bit turning into and cutting against the material. This is also going to pull the router snugly tight up against that sled wall and making for a nice steady pass. I noticed when I pull or push the router the wrong way, it not only felt like the router was unstable, but it also left these small tear out marks you can see in this cell phone video here, which added a lot more time on the sander later to get rid of these. Once I've made as many shallow 1/8-inch passes as needed, in my case, I think it took about 2 passes on each side. I'm gonna flip the slab over, rinse and repeat on the other side. If you've leveled the first side correctly and your jig's base is level, you shouldn't need to use any shims to stabilize the slab, since that first side should now be completely flat. No pressure. So let's move on into sanding. Now, making sure your jig fence and router sled base is flat and level is greatly going to speed up sanding. A lot of people I saw said you needed a belt sander to smooth out the top and get rid of all those bit markings on the passes you made earlier, but this 6-inch Festool sander that I have with some 60 and 80 grit sandpaper did an amazing job. If you're going to upgrade any tool in your shop, I highly recommend upgrading your sanders first. You'll thank me later, I promise. So I worked my way through 60, 80, 120, all the way to 150 grit on top. I didn't want to go any further than 150 because of the finish I was going to be using later. And I did the same on the bottom, but not nearly as thorough. This is going to be the underside of the standing desk. I just wanted to get rid of any router or burn marks on the underside. There were quite a few burn marks, but I got rid of all of them. I always say, if you're going to build something, you might as well make it look pretty. After working up to 150 grit, I did do a water pop on the top surface and the sides. I let it dry and then lightly went over it again with 150 grit. The water on the wood will raise the small wood fibers and actually make it feel rough again. And then a quick sanding once it's completely dried. I go over it very lightly with 150 grit again, and this is gonna make for an extra smooth finish. So before adding the finish to this slab, I'm gonna clean up the shop and make sure the dust is settled completely, or if you have one of those nice air filters in there, make sure it filters all the dust out before you get started and open that finish can. I'm finishing this slab with Rubio Monocoat Pure. I love this stuff. I'm mixing the Rubio with the activator in a 3-to-1 ratio. Gonna stir for 1 to 2 minutes, then apply a generous amount all over the slab. I need a much bigger scraper than this little plastic putty knife I was using, so I'm gonna add that to my shopping list for later. I finished the underside first so I could flip it over and then let the top surface cure without touching anything. I wasn't as concerned with the bottom since the Flexispot desk base was going to be attached to the underside and all the cables and everything are going to be running underneath there. You're actually never going to see it. To make this easier on myself and my lovely wife, who I constantly recruit to help me flip slabs over and carry things in and out of the house, I got the Flexispot base assembled in the garage, got it spaced correctly on the underside of the slab, pre-drilled all the holes for the mounting screws, and then we took the slab up first and then took the base up second so that we weren't carrying the whole thing together. and then I assembled it in the studio upstairs. And here you go. I love it when a plan comes together. We have a nice, beautiful standing desk made of solid maple in this new studio that I'm going to be working out of. Coming up with more free plans and cool build videos for all you wonderful people out there. You guys have been awesome supporting the channel here. Be sure to subscribe and like. If you guys like this video, be sure to check out this video in the corner here. Also check out Flexispot. They have been awesome and a huge support to the channel. Check out their desks and buy one for yourself in the description below. I hope to see you guys in the next video.